Welcome to the Economy and Politics show, designed for conversations on the economy, policies, and how they impact livelihood of households. This edition will focus on agriculture, the major contributor to the Nigeria's gross domestic product and one of the highest employers of labor. Recently, President Bolade Tinubu unveiled his 8-point agenda, and one of the priority areas is food security. Joining me to discuss Nigeria and the quest for food security are industry leaders and analysts in the agricultural sector. I have Mr. Akinsola Akeredlolu-Ale, the CEO of the Lagos Commodities and Futures Exchange, who has joined virtually, and same with Mr. Agbola, CEO, LamAgro Consult. In the studio with me is Mr. Aderounmu, a commodities markets analyst with Proshare. Gentlemen, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Yeah.
So let me begin by asking you, Mr. Bolade, under this administration, we've seen two interventions by the government. First was the state of emergency on food security, and second was the 200 billion naira intervention for the Agric expansion program. And despite policy steps taken by previous administration interventions, we've still seen agriculture not harness or unlock its potentials to drive growth, unlock economic opportunities, and even feed the nation. So I'd like to understand from you if this is the right policy step so far for the sector by this administration.
Well, definitely it's too early to assess the policy framework, and we must bear in mind the fact that the government has just been constituted, but what was done was a palliative measure because of the expectations of a very unusual lean period, because in every agricultural cycle for a country like Nigeria, June to August is always a very challenging period because of the exhaustion of last year's harvest and expectation of this year's harvest. So those palliatives were actually put to address that short-term problem. But the real issue is addressing agriculture in Nigeria is a deep fundamental issue that has to be well articulated and well implemented. And I believe that is in the works by the new government. A lot has to be done in every facet of the agricultural value chain so that we can have food safety in the country.
Very, very important that we need to have a proper articulation that connects with food security for the country. Thank you very much, Mr. Bolade. I'll come back to you on the issue of policy. So to you, Paul, we're talking about the value chain. That's been one of the challenges in the sector, because when you talk about value chain, it talks about ensuring that everything connects effectively to unlock value for economy. But what's really the challenge, or what are the challenges that we need to address to unlock value in the whole agric sector, looking at the value chain approach?
Okay, thank you. When you look at the agricultural sector in Nigeria and you look at the value chain that exists in each of the commodity we're going in Nigeria, you want to look at the crops or the commodity we have competitive advantage in, and the ability for Nigerians to be able to tap into the huge value chain that we have. Mind you, it's good to also see that you look at top agricultural products we are producing, or that we are top producing, not just in Africa, but in the world. You look at them each one by one, and you realize that they have huge value chain. You take cocoa, for example, there are a lot of derivative we can get from it. So when you look at the value chain, you're not just looking at the production only. We're looking at the two ends of the supply of the smile curve. You're looking at the marketing, you're looking at the patents, you're looking at derivative also in the production. So when you look at it, beyond amounts we are producing and we are also generating in terms of revenue, for us to even get ×2, ×3 of them, we need to go into the value chain, look at the logistics, look at the marketing, look at the export products. When you take maize, or you take cocoa, for example, or palm oil, there are also crops you can also look at that has huge potential in terms of the value chain. You look at the value market itself in terms of cocoa, you're looking at 500 billion naira. When you take palm palm oil is a huge market for us. In the palm oil, these are industries where these things can function very well and effectively. You look at millets, you look at other derivatives we have in Nigeria. When we tap into this huge value chain, it makes it better for us to diversify. It makes it better for us to less rely on import products, because when we export most of these commodities we are producing, we are importing the derivative back into the country. So our inability to be able to tap into the value chain itself of each of these commodity had made us over-reliance on the fact that we have to import back these products back into the country while we are exporting them in its raw material. So that aspect alone, it should be a rich concentration for us as a country to be able to make agricultural move from where it has been, where it is, and make Nigeria a major player, not just in African scene, but on the global market.
Yeah, because when you look at non-oil exports, in terms of creating value from revenue, it's talking about value addition to our exports. And one most important way for us is to ensure that the value chain, the various things we raise, for example, cocoa and palm oil, for example, if we can add value to them and export, we will get much better value for it. But that's something that, again, is a key issue that has to be addressed by the current administration. But let's go to the CEO of the Lagos Commodities and Future Exchange, Mr. Akinsola Akeredlolu-Ale. We know that the Commodities Exchange have become like game changers in terms of improving our agric value chain. And that is especially in terms of what the promise shows in the area of price discovery and value creation for smallholder farmers. Just share with us a bit of how that is playing up in the commodity crops that are being traded. Also, it's interesting to note that ginger is also now being traded and approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission on the LCFE. How is that panning out also?
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon. First of all, like the earlier speakers have spoken, there was a conversation on palliative, and my colleague also spoke about beneficiation. You see, the role of the commodities exchange is more of like to create the enabling environment, medium of exchange for price discovery for the smallholder farmers to be able to participate better. Now, for smallholders to be able to participate, the major issue now is the issue of price discovery, and also the issue of standardization and the quality of what they are producing. Now, if you have price discovery for them, and you have liquidity, which is the option for them to be able to sell, be able to go back to the market to be able to participate more, it makes it easier for that particular value chain to grow. And then for you to also be able to do that, like the previous speaker had mentioned, you'll have to do what we call the beneficiation, whereby you should be able to, refine these products or process them to a better level instead of just exporting them raw as it were. For example, like it mentioned, we have the ginger. The ginger is trading at about 45,000 on the average per ton. It's a very, very big market for the export market. But one of the things that we still need to do is that we need to look at the demography of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We're talking about almost about 230 million people that must feed on a daily basis. And we look at the West African coast also, being the giant of Africa and being the giant of West Africa. We have the multiplier effect of the intra-Africa trade to be able to sell in the neighboring countries, for them to be able to buy from us, and for us to be able to take the lead. So in the ginger trade, yes, there's a little bit of the issue of specification, because the level of dryness that's required for international exports must be met before you can evacuate a ginger out of Nigeria. And fortunately, the Standards Organization and the various regulatory institutions now are putting those structures in place for us to get the right specification for some of these approved products like ginger for export, apart from the fact that Nigerians also consume a lot of ginger in Nigeria. On the market, it's traded aggressively very well, particularly because it's seasonal, and then a particular season spikes, and a particular season it goes down. But the major thing is for you to be able to get the level of dryness that's required, for you to be able to export it out of Nigeria, which is a very big market. About 3 years ago, we did 734,000 metric tons, and it tanked a little bit to about 725,000 metric tons. And I think this current year, by the time we finish the year, I'm sure the yield will not be as bad as previous 2 years.
That's remarkable. I mean, just using the ginger story, it just shows how great opportunities we have in terms of the commodities exchange and value creation for the market. But just like you've rightly highlighted, we need to address some of the additional issues around logistics and improving our infrastructure. But of course, I'm happy about the standardization, which is very important for that. But in 30 seconds, I would like Mr. Bolade to just speak to what the commodities exchange is doing and what do you expect to see more happen from that end. And I'll come to Mr. Paul before I get into the next conversation. Mr. Bolade?
Yes, for agribusiness, access to market is a key element in driving production, in driving processing, in driving standardization. You know, for any commodity to be traded effectively in the commodities exchange, it has to be standardized, and it's the papers that are traded. So when you have a functional commodities exchange as we are having now, it also helps the value chain, both from the input to production and processing and distribution. So the essence of the commodity exchange has been emphasized is to actually facilitate that price discovery, that we help the producers and the marketers and normalize the margins throughout the year. That will also help in because it's a lot of value addition, even in credit. You know, I can have commodities in the warehouse certified by the exchange and go to the bank and borrow money, either to start production for the next cropping season or even to start restocking so that I can sell. So it's a critical link, and thank God we are having it in place. And of course, it will drive everything. The quality that is you need to meet before you can have your goods traded speaks to production, speaks to the kind of input you use, and then of course, the value chains are so many things we can actually trade in Nigeria, because we are one of the most blessed countries in the world in terms of diversity of our agro-climatic structure. We have the rainforest, the savannas, and the temperate, semi-temperate region in this place. So there are virtually so many agricultural products that we can generate here.
Let me follow up with Mr. Akinsola Akeredlolu-Ale. Mr. Akinsola, Mr. Bolade has talked about the need to improve crop production. How would you like to see the investments in research and development and the revamp of our Agric institutes? What would you like to see happen differently? Because we hear every time a new minister comes on board and promises that they will invest more in R&D and revamp our Agric institutes, but at the end of it, we still see that they're not effectively utilized. And going to what Mr. Bolade has raised, we need to upscale crop production. That talks about research, that talks about the inputs, and that talks about the activities of agri-extension officers.
Unfortunately, if that issue of research and development is not addressed, we're going to be lagging behind a lot. Because on hectare basis, if you do a lot of R&D and your inputs are improved on, and there are better technologies and the seeds are improved, that means that the yield per hectare will improve tremendously. There are some new technologies and some new inputs that for cassava, for example, per acreage, by the time you use the new ones, instead of maybe doing like 30%, you'll be doing almost like 80% per acreage on by way of technology. And for you to do this, you must be able to do the R&D, the research and development, improve on the input at any point in time, because whatever input you put into the space, that's what you harvest at the end of the day. And I think one of the things that you have touched on briefly is the fact that we have a lot of research institutes. We had even international research institutes that have been working in Nigeria, and we have universities of agriculture in Nigeria and institutes in Nigeria. I think all these institutes need to be reactivated, and people to be motivated, the lecturers and all that, to be able to go and participate in the research so that we can have better outputs in whatever we're doing. If not, any of the seeds that we're importing to, for use in Nigeria, we will pay the premium in dollars for it, for to be able to bring this input in. For example, for wheat, if you don't produce our own wheat, the ones that we're supposed to plant, it means we'll have to import. And when you import, you're going to pay the premium for the research that's been done over there and the quality of input in the technology that's been put into. So yes, for us to be able to have better harvests, we need this input, and the R&Ds need to be activated back. The universities require grants, because these are efficient grants that will support research and development. The federal universities are supposed to be supported more, so that that particular sector, agric engineering, agriculture, people start looking at it from a lucrative point of view, and more students want to participate in that particular R&D space. If we have this being done, it means that the peculiar products that are with Nigeria, based on our own Nigerian soil, will be able to improve on the lots and will be able to have better output at any point in time. And we need to participate. Those are some of the things that Nexin is also doing by partnering with people to support them in doing more research for them to be able to go and pick up better inputs that can support the commodities.
Okay, Paul, let me come to you in 30 seconds. Talking about research and development, investments in that area, what is your perspective? Because we need to see real activity in that regard.
Okay, just a quick follow-up on what was said earlier. When we need to invest in terms of R&D, we're looking at more of Nigeria coming into Agric Science. Developing an Agric Science study in Nigeria would mean a lot in terms of improving our annual yield across all commodities we have in Nigeria. And looking at, I was doing a bit of a research. China did a platform where they employ a traditional farmer and a biotechnological farmer to plant the same seed over a period of time. And at the end of the day, you'll find out that the traditional farmer will maintain the style of farming over the years compared to someone who invented or who bring in the aspect of technology, agric science, and implementation into the process, was able to scale up about 30% or 40% higher than somebody who use the same traditional farming. So yes, we need to start looking at investments in agricultural science, bringing in technology. The world is advancing. Our technology, the use of AI, blockchain, everything is advancing. We need to start seeing this new administration shifting towards that area to be able to bring in technology, agric science, more grant for research institutes to be able to develop research. Mexico and US was talking about the deal as regards genetically modified corn, which is currently what they are using for their animal feeds. But Mexico recently banned it on human consumption. But when you look at it, we need to start looking towards that area, adopting technology for our agric science. So you're looking at a farmer who wants to go into farm, you don't just start planting the very moment you want to go into plant. You need to deploy technology to be able to know what's the soil nutrients, the soil fertility, how long can this the soil be able to, what yield is it going to give us at the end of the day? So there is need for us to start looking more of investing into agric science. This way, just like it was said, we'll be able to increase our annual yield. We're looking at crops like cocoa, ginger. Crops we basically have competitive advantage on, and if we look at this area, we could see our annual yield moving forward. I'll be a major player.
Now, speaking about yield and production of our crops to capacity that we can export them, I'm going to start with Mr. Bolade. I'll come to Mr. Akinsola and of course Paul. I'd like to know what should be our top 5 priority crops to concentrate for production and export capacity that can create value for us, diversify our foreign exchange earnings, because we must move from crude oil dependency when it comes to foreign exchange earnings. We need to also diversify it. So I'll begin with Mr. Bolade. What should be our top 5 priority crops for production and export capacity?
Well, we in deciding on, you see, you cannot produce everything you require as a nation.
Yes.
So the first thing is to look at areas where you have advantage in terms of weather, in terms of technology. And for us in Nigeria, you also look at your needs. Cassava is Proshare because it's used, it can be grown, it's the most rugged crop you can think about. So, and it's used for a number of things. Rice is crucial because that's what we feed on, even though we don't have we have challenges growing it. Maize is crucial because animals, human beings eat it. In fact, maize also has the technology that you can double the output of maize from an average of 1.5 tons per hectare to 3. You will find out that, or even 5, you'll find out that We have sufficient to feed our livestock, poultry, and even cattle. So in looking at priority crops, and then when you are looking at export crops, you are looking at sesame seed, you are looking at oil palm, which has domestic use. And so even for a big country like Nigeria, you may probably be looking at having 2 reference crops that you can develop by each of the 6 geopolitical zones, so that you have a wide latitude, very wide. For instance, if you are talking of soya bean, if you are talking of sesame seeds, yeah, I mean, it's of export potential, huge one. And of course, you are talking of oil palm. We have the oil palm belts and we have the cocoa beds. I think the key element which we need to know as a nation is that you need to have funding of agriculture is crucial. And the problem we have in Nigeria is that agriculture is not being properly funded. The last budget, the estimate for agriculture was 1.05%. And we were part of the people that signed the Malabo agreement, where we agreed that for African nations to grow about 6% per annum, which is required for us to bridge the development gap, we need to make sure that not less than 10% of our budgets for the nationals, the countries, is devoted to agriculture. 10%. We are not even doing 50% of that in Nigeria. It's when we fund our agriculture, then research will benefit from it. In fact, some nations have gone ahead and say, okay, even if you are funding agriculture, 1% of your funding for agriculture goes to research, because that is what determines your final output. Then the other issue is extension services. If you want farmers to pry the right seed, you must develop extension services. You must stop the situation where we are just planting any seed. We must have 4th generation seed. So there are so many things that we need to tick the box to be able to get our agriculture right.
Let me get to Mr. Akinsola. Mr. Akinsola.
Thank you very much. I think from my own side, I'll look at it from both the business point of view and the needs point of view, as has been mentioned earlier. So we have, like I mentioned earlier, we have 260 million people, or between 240 and 260 million people projected. And first of all, we need to service the needs internally before you start looking at exports. And at the same time, we also need the export proceeds to be able to at least build up our reserves also too. So I'll divide the cash crop into short-term, medium-term, and long-term. In short-term business, as you mentioned, our immediate needs, we must be able to focus heavily on rice, which is a basic staple in Nigeria. And if we have enough, we can export to the West African coast for intra-African trade there. Then we must also be able, because it's almost the bedrock of a lot of things that we read to so many other things. Those two will be prioritized, at least stabilize the country. And on the export side of it, I think it's high time we start looking at how we start medium term. We start replanting our cocoa trees. The ones that we have are already aged. They are like 35, 40-year-old trees and all that. It's better we start looking at them, because they will earn money for the country for the next 30 years after they must have been planted. The same thing with cashew and shea butter in the medium term, and also the oil palm. But at the end of the day, for livestock and co, you look at soybean and sesame. These are basic cash crops that we can either export, and at the same time, we're not exporting them, we use them internally. And the good thing about the ones I've mentioned is that if we don't even produce them to use internally, it means that we'll have to import them. So it's better for us to produce them for consumption, and if we have excess, then we export them, than we start importing them and start bringing them from other countries. Those are the middle ones. And then, like I mentioned, in the medium term, in the long term also, I think Nigeria's oil palm plantations are really, really, really aged also. We need to start deploying new ones. When you plant them, we'll be harvesting them for the next 30 years by way of revenue, and rubber plantations also for our export market. Those are my own views.
Okay, so Paul, as we wrap up now, in 1 minute, speak to these crops and priority, and then what should be the priority of the Minister of Agriculture as Senator Abubakar Kyari?
Okay, they rightly pointed out most of the crop that we have competitive advantage. And I think I also go with the same line of thoughts like aforementioned. Looking at the agenda for the Minister of Agriculture, I think it's high time we start looking at, first of all, tackling the issue that has been limiting our production in Nigeria. We're looking at issues like insecurity. We've over time recorded attacks on farmers not being able to access their farmland as risk of life and properties, no insurance for them, neither their produce also too. So the issue of security should be addressed, because that's the only way we can guarantee food security in the country. And secondly, we also need to tackle the issue of fertilizer and pest. I mean, this has been a major concern. Farmers have been able to say that fertilizer has been on the rise. The cost of fertilizer, NPK, and the likes has been on the rise, and also battling with the issue of pest at the same time. And lastly, I think I will just mention the aspect of post-harvest losses due to low storage capacity. Looking at farmers, most of this crop have complained the fact that at the end of the day, after their harvest, you're only able to save a less percentage of their produce due to the fact that there is no proper storage management, greenhouses. These are the things we should look out for. If you are producing and not being able to meet, which we still have demand deficits at this point, I think it all boils down to the fact that we are producing, but at the same time, we have pest infestation, attacks, and storage facilities. These are the points that should be addressed. And I think we would also be able to maintain our production in most crops where we are producing, and also scale up the entire value chain.
Okay, I'll go to Mr. Bolade and Mr. Akinsola. 1 minute each. Priority for the Agriculture Minister.
Well, I think the first priority for the Agricultural Minister is to actually have a medium-term plan. We've been having 3-year plans so that we can address all these issues with a wholesome document that we can use for another 10 years. We need to have a perspective plan on how our agriculture should be. And we'll be having medium-term plans, but we need a long-term plans. It is the long-term plan that will take care of the peculiarity of those tree crops, which farmers don't plant because they need savings to do it. They need cash flow for the 3 years they're going to wait before they start handling. And then, of course, the minister should also have an agenda to rev up the budget for agriculture. He has to use every of his influence to get agricultural budget to go up. It's because of the low agricultural budget that we are not able to maintain our dams. We are not able to build new ones. We are not able to irrigate our farms. Everywhere in the world, you don't rely 100% on rain-fed agriculture. Even as poor as India is, 50% of their farmland is under irrigation. Ours is not even up to 7%. So we are just nimble, like just instead of really drawing out the potential. And there's nothing we can achieve if our budget for agriculture is as low as 1% or 1.4% in the last 10 years.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Akinsola.
Thank you very much, Ottoabasi. One thing that I know clearly about the Federal Republic of Nigeria is that we have the arable land, we have the quality soil, we have the manpower, we have the demand to consume it, and then we have the products also to build. I think the major focus is for agriculture in Nigeria should be more of how do we put in place these strategic partnerships across board. When I say strategic partnerships, for example, haulage, how do we activate the rail systems to move goods from the north down to the port, from the port down all the way to the north? How do we stream down the cost of haulage? Because the cost of haulage is almost about 30% cost of the commodities in Nigeria. How do we speak with the customs to make it easier for Nigerians to be able to participate in the export space? How do we decongest the ports so that exports can be easy for Nigerians, so that Nigerians don't lose? In some countries like Kenya, there's a policy in those countries that states clearly that any truck that you see that's moving commodities from one location to the other, you must allow it to get to where it's going. A lot of trucks in the haulage industry here, they get stuck on the road for one reason or the other in the regulatory space, one. And two, there's been a lot of been spoken about our budgets, for us to put a lot more in the budget for agriculture. Apart from that, I think we should be looking at how do we create that hybrid of a public-private partnership arrangement. How does the private sector come in to participate in this? That's the confidence that the commodities exchanges and others are giving to the banks. We know that because of sectoral risks, the banks have not been putting too much. They have less than 5% of their balance sheet in agriculture. How do you encourage them to participate more in this particular space because of the sectoral risk? And of course, you have the capital market in place now that has been funding our infrastructure in Nigeria, funding so many other things. And we started creating structures to create access for people to be able to raise capital to fund agriculture in Nigeria, both at the national level, at the subnational level, and at the private sector level, so that we can grow that market. These are things that they need to look at, and also to encourage the financial institutions to start accepting to look at instruments that are agreed-based as a collateral, so that it's easier for these people to create liquidity and to be able to raise capital at any point in time. There. And the last part of it is the stakeholders in that particular ecosystem, the processors there in that space, the people that are in the anchor borrower scheme. It's a bigger ecosystem. There has to be ways to coordinate these people and create lesser policies that are more friendly for these people to participate. By way of this, all the structures that we have on the ground and the assets that we have on the ground, including land, including the products, the people that the manpower, will be able to coordinate them to be able to bring out a good result. If we don't do all this together, we'll have the resources in place and we'll be working on those resources without being able to coordinate them very well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bolade Agbola, the CEO of LamAgro Consult. Thank you very much, Mr. Bolade Agbola, for the time.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Mr. Akinsola Akeredlolu-Ale. Thank you, the CEO of the Lagos Commodities and Future Exchange. I know you had to take out of your busy schedule to be part of this conversation. Thank you very, very much. And of course, Paul Aderounmu, a commodities analyst with Proshare. Thank you very much for taking out the time. And of course, it's been a very interesting conversation on Nigeria and the quest for food security. The key word is that we must take every step to coordinate our policy, investment in R&D, research and development, and also ensure that the entire value chain works together to boost a productive economy. To our viewers, if you want to get further insights on this conversation, visit the Proshare website displayed on the screen and follow the social media platforms to engage. To become your way again, enrich yourself with the knowledge of socio-economic developments around you, because it's the wise thing to do. Thank you for watching. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong, and bye for now.